Well, hello there, and welcome to the show. It's Tuesday. It's my weekly chat with Eric Peters. As I like to call it, this is our latest meeting at the Church of the Painful Truth.
Oh,
Welcome,
I love it.
brothers and
That's
sisters.
fantastic. Well,
Actually,
you'll
I'm
be
borrowing
pleased
that
to
from
know.
Neil Bortz, but it still rings true. There are painful truths. And how are you? How are you
Oh,
doing
I'm in a
today?
very cheerful mood today because the great Golden Golan has promised some relief at the pump. They're talking about temporarily rescinding the federal tax on gas. Of course, the federal tax on gas is 18 cents. So, joy. Instead of paying 4.50 a gallon, we'll be paying 4.28 a gallon for a little while. And then they'll
Uh,
jack up our taxes to make up for the loss of the federal revenue from the gas tax. Maybe I'm not.
it's painful. I was going through my checkbook the other day, actually looking at my electronic statement online, just kind of reconciling, okay, where am I spending? And I was like, what, $75? Where did I spend $75? And then I realized, oh yeah, I gassed up the car,
Sure.
the diesel Volkswagen, and yeah, $75. Hello.
Yeah, I try, I dread going to the mailbox to get my credit card statement to see, see, soon it's going to be, oh, am I going to be able to buy some oatmeal this month, maybe? Or will I just have to, go without? And I guess it'll help. I'll lose some weight, I suppose.
So here's what I'm thinking. If we could somehow construct some sort of a golden idol that we could worship. Somehow it might appease the gods who oversee gas and oil prices, and perhaps they will hear our. Oh wait, you said that he'd already did. Never mind. We're
Well, I guess
18
we
cents,
just
huh?
gold plate everything. Apparently that's the key to making America great again. Gild everything, literally. Have you seen what the Oval Office looks like now?
I have not.
You ought to go look it up.
Is it?
Trump has put garish gold leaf on practically every surface imaginable. He's got a fetish about it, almost like the golden calf kind of a thing going on.
You've seen the statue, right,
Yeah,
down there
the
at
20-foot
Mar-a-Lago.
statue.
I,
Yeah, yeah.
and that's look. It's, for people who are like, look, we're just trying to honor the guy. We're just trying to show him respect. That's not the same thing as worship. Okay, but the fact that you have to defend it as if people are like, hey, why are people, upset? It's not like, golden objects and people, rallying around them has ever been problematic in the past. Well, maybe since the time of Moses, but holy cow. That's
It's kind of like Soviet meets like New Jersey Mafia Don. In the Soviet Union, they had these effigies produced of Stalin and Lenin and all the great leaders posing heroically. But at least they were just concrete. Now you got them with gold leaf on top of it. You can imagine John Gotti doing something like this, and essentially that's who we've got running the country now.
it's I can never get out of my head the image of that statue of Saddam Hussein being pulled down. And for anybody who's like, well, they put up a statue of me, I'm like, yeah, be careful though. Those things come down pretty nice too. And maybe someday, the people who are calling the shots will want to take down your statue because you said or did something they consider, offensive. And we're going to rewrite history.
Oy vey. I don't even know what to say anymore. Well, I guess I do because this could be the week when the piece that is on life support, to use Orange Man's term, um, falls apart and the war gets hot again, and gas prices will probably go through the roof again. This problem has not gone away. It's as if it's sort of just been gently pushed to the side just a little bit while people get used to paying $5 a gallon for gas. And I guess once that shock abates, then they'll be ready for the next shock when it goes up to $6. And I think at
Well,
that point, my own belief is that if it does get to $6, that will be the tipping point. That will be the point at which it's no longer that people are just griping. It will be catastrophic. People won't be able to afford. It won't be worth going to work anymore. It won't be worth doing anything anymore because you literally cannot afford to do it anymore. Everything's getting that way. We could segue into, I went to the movies the other day with Dawn for the first time in several years, and I was shocked that two tickets were $35 to go see
oh,
a movie.
well,
And
I'm sure the nice person at the counter was there to, help you and,
yeah, he
attend to
did.
your needs. And
I was initially baffled because you walk into this place, and I had been there before several years ago. There's sort of like a cashier stand, but there's nobody there. Well, it turns out what's there is an LCD touchscreen, and you tap and swipe and you pick what movie you want to watch, and then you put your credit card in, and it spits out the ticket all the while you're being surveilled by an AI camera. So they fired the teenagers, and the price still goes up. There's no help, there's no human being that they're paying for, and you're still paying $35 to watch basically some formulaic CGI fight thing. That's just, it's tiresome and tedious. It's as if they are incapable of producing a quality script anymore. It's just scenes, loud scenes with some improbable character leaping from a building to another building and then doing some sort of over backflip jujitsu thing. That's the basically the plot.
I read a really interesting article recently from Annie Holmquist, and she has her own Substack, but she was talking about why Hollywood has trouble creating box office hits. And she actually deferred to Russell Kirk's book, Enemies of the Permanent Things. And Kirk actually said, it's the problem is you have Marxism that has kind of infiltrated the writers in Hollywood. So there are things that they cannot touch on because of their Marxist leanings. And this is not to say everybody's a commie, but tell me if these don't ring true. Religion, taboo. You cannot portray it, at least in a positive sense. Everybody religious has to be evil or have some ulterior motive. Love, and I mean like real, devotion of one person to another. No, love is nothing more than physical impulse and acting on it. Heroism was another one, and that is the idea of honor and duty and fortitude. But heroism anymore is just basically you work for the state. It's servile. And last but not least was private fortune within storytelling. They cannot acknowledge that as a positive because right it's all about the exploitation of the workers. And if you think about Hollywood movies in these terms, when can you think of one that came? There may be some. I haven't watched any for a while, but can you think of a movie that's come along that celebrated any of those four things?
No, and it's not even, it's worse than that too, in my opinion, because it's juvenile. It's as if everything is catered to the mentality of a 13-year-old. It's this sort of this Marvel superhero paradigm where everybody just does karate fights, CGI, jumping around, car chases, and that's the extent of it. And I guess it sells. They manage to attract people who want to watch that stuff over and over and over again. They just reboot old things. I want to, we got assaulted with probably at least a half hour, if not 45 minutes worth of ads. We paid $35 to watch 30 to 40 minutes of ads before the movie comes on. And so you see the previews. They're going to make a movie of the 80s kids cartoon He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. You can just see they keep digging, scraping that barrel, find something that was done before, CGI it, and voila, you got a movie. Nothing original, nothing new, nothing, as you say, that's thoughtful and important. Nothing that makes you think, wow, and contemplate the important things, the eternal things, the verities that mattered. It's just a scene designed to elicit some temporary, transient emotional response.
I've officially become the old guy who's shaking his fist and turning purple because kids are jumping through the hedges or something. I mean, Hollywood just has nothing to offer me at this point. I don't follow the gossip. I don't follow, did you see what so and so was wearing at this award show and stuff? I just don't care. But mostly I notice it, when if I do get a minute to sit down and we're watching TV, I rarely can find something that I feel is worth my time to sit and watch for 2 hours.
I don't think it's old manism. I think it's objectively the case that things are just crap now. Look at cars. I think you and I talked about this once before. I was in traffic a few months back, and I noticed that there was a Bentley up ahead. A Bentley, this is a $250,000 car. Same cheap painted plastic body. Nothing about it that to me said, wow, that's a cut above. That's special. It's just more expensive, sure. And that, I guess, gives it a degree of exclusivity because not everybody can afford to spend $250,000 on a car. But there was a time when a Bentley had, foot deep chrome, they could almost go for a swim in it. Just beautiful craftsmanship, something that you never saw in other cars. Now it's just like every other car. Might as well have been a Camry, just a really expensive Camry.
Now, at the risk of sounding like, okay, so you guys are just complaining about, the all the new modern stuff. Yes, you could take it that way, but I think in a stronger way, we're trying to make the case for there are things that are substantive. There are things that are worth your time. Now, I'm looking over your shoulder, Eric, and I see books.
Yes.
And I don't mean to sound elitist when I say this. I have loved reading ever since I was a young kid. But one of the things that I take very seriously at this point in my life is I hang on to books, especially books that I consider worthwhile and that have lasting value, meaning I can go back to them and learn something new from them each time that I read them. I also have books that I have yet to read. And the Japanese have a term for it. I don't remember what it is, but it's more books than you can read. But it's that sense of I'm never done learning. And I'm just going to encourage people before you sit back and just passively absorb whatever, as you put out, CGI generated fight and sound Hollywood is putting out, consider putting in some time reading the pages of an actual book, turning the pages with your finger. And you might just find that that does more for your mental well-being, your understanding, and your appreciation of what is good and what is true than, a month's worth of movies consumed sitting there with a remote in your hand.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just the tactile aspect, there's the permanence aspect to it. A book is a thing that you can enjoy throughout your life, and then you can pass it down to the next person. To me, there's always been something incredibly appealing about, and I've never had the opportunity to do this. I'm envious of people who've had the opportunity to go and actually in person see a book from 1,000 years ago, a manuscript, and to actually read that and think, another person, it's a connection to somebody that lived hundreds or 1,000 years ago who wrote this down. And now you can read the words that they were reading. Somebody was sitting where you are looking at those very pages, and here you are. And with any luck, 1,000 years from now, another person will be looking at those same pages. And there's a continuity there in the human experience that's lost when everything is, the attention span of a gnat. Look at this pretty picture. Look at that pretty picture. Move on to the next pretty picture.
I'm going to suggest something really subversive. And I say that because our mothers taught us do not write in books. You do not, take your pencil or your pen or crayon or whatever. You don't write in books. But here's the case that I would make that actually you should. If there are books that you read that have really been instrumental in helping you understand something, it is worthwhile to do annotations, your thoughts, your observations. And there's two things that happen here. One, you can go back and read that book at a later time and you can actually see how your understanding has increased. Oh, that's how I saw it back then. Here's how I understand it now. But there will come a day where there will be those who come after you. It may be family members, or it may be, just an interested person researching who was this Eric Peters of Eric Peters Autos. They will have a chance to sit with you figuratively on their shoulder as they read that book and they start to see your thinking process and understand what was going through your mind. I had a very dear mentor when I lived in southern Utah. This was the guy who actually kind of got me on the path to a classical liberal arts education. And I inherited one of his books after he passed away. His wife gave me a book of his. And when I read it, Abe's annotations are in there, and it is just like my friend is right there with me once again. The relationship with him feels renewed. I sense, his pleasure that I'm still learning, and he's right there by my side.
Yeah,
Some
Martin.
people that'll make sense to, others maybe not.
And as somebody, I'm a historian, amateur historian, and that I just love to read about history. And one of the things that's always been interesting to me is to read a book that was owned by a historical figure in which there's marginalia, and you can see what that person underlined and what they thought was important, and you can gain a deeper understanding of what they were thinking, and
Absolutely.
derive meaning from that. And you just can't get that from electronic media. And another thing that's important, given the times that we live in, this chaos and this sense that things might one day just turn off electronically, books are permanent. When you own a book, you have it, and unless the thing is physically destroyed, you will always have it, and you can pass it along. All the things that you have on your Kindle reader, well, what happens if the electricity goes off? And what happens if they pull the plug on the Kindle? Well, everything that you have in that electronic library is now gone. Also, they can, and they do this. This is really Orwellian, but they do this. They go back and they rewrite some of these classic books because of their politically incorrect usages and thoughts that are expressed. They can't do that when you physically possess the book.
That reminds me, I saw a meme, I think about a week ago, of someone saying, the reason I like reading books over watching Netflix is that I read the story and my character doesn't suddenly turn gay for no reason whatsoever.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, that is a book.
Amen.
And it goes with what you're saying. They're written, it's there in black and white. It's not going to be changed according to the whim of what's popular today or isn't popular.
And it's a check on the, what Orwell called the mutability of the past. With this electronic media, they can change things. And if you're not aware, if you haven't read the actual book, if you encounter something for the very first time on screen, let's say, an adaptation of a work of literature that was written 100 years ago, you might believe that this interpretation, which markedly deviates from what the original book was, is in fact correct. Whereas if you've actually read the book and you know what the story was, and you encounter this alteration, it's it's off-putting because you recognize somebody's trying to manipulate you, somebody's trying to change what it was. Whether you like it or not is irrelevant. The point is, this is what it was, and it's dishonest to alter it in that way to try to present a counterfactual account of what was written in that book.
Hey, speaking of manipulation, let me just say the words hantavirus.
Oh gosh, I know,
Are we, is the next
I
pandemic
know.
here? What's
Well, they're trying. Who knows? It's very difficult in these days to ascertain what's really going on, but you're beginning to see these little bubbles percolate upward, and on X and so on of it's time to mask up, and they're actually doing this in some European countries. So today, after we get off the air, I'm going to hit the gym and I'm going to go to the supermarket, and I'm going to be very curious to see if there's an uptick in masking. I suspect that there will be because it's never gone away. I'd say that just about every single time that I go out somewhere, whether it's Lowe's, a supermarket, whatever, there'll be at least one person who is still wearing the mask. Now they've got a reason. Oh my gosh, the hantavirus is coming. It's going to get us all. And I do worry that they're potentially going to try to use this as the pretext for another round of COVID. I hope not. I've had enough. I'm ready to paint my face blue like Braveheart if that happens again.
well, we definitely, I think those of us who got through COVID and stayed intact and unmanipulated and unjabbed, we our line in the sand is there, and it's been fortified. And I don't think we're going to have to struggle with the decisions that people did, 6 years ago. I think for most of us that line is really, really clear. By the
I
way,
hope so.
I did see a very solid recommendation for how to protect yourself against the hantavirus, and it involved taking a foam earplug, roll it gently, and insert one into one ear, insert one into the other ear. Problem solved.
That's well done. And by the way, I'm glad we started talking about this. Did you catch Trump's appearance on 60 Minutes over the weekend?
I didn't.
Well, among other things, he said that he doesn't think all vaccines should be mandated, just some, the ones that he
Hmm.
thinks ought to be mandated.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to say no, brah.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting because to me it was revelatory of the mindset of people like Trump. I call them the self-chosen. That's in a secular sense because they do see themselves as godlike. I mean, think about the arrogance of I'm going to decide for you which drugs you're going to be forced to take because I think so. I believe so. And here's a guy, Trump. He's an obese 80. He doesn't take care of his own health, who has absolutely no background in medicine or anything related to the matter at hand, who's going to say he believes. That's the word he used. He believes some vaccines ought to be mandated. It's absolutely outrageous.
Yep, yep. That's I'll cross that bridge when we get there, but I'm telling you, my answer is no
No.
already. So hopefully that saves us some time for the
Well,
people
you
who
can
think
see
that they
I'm
could
wearing
proceed. Oh,
my plague doctor shirt to go out today.
well, I'll be watching for the video report because I know you're taking your camera with you.
Absolutely.
Um, one other thing, let's talk a little bit about automotive stuff. This is one of the things I love about having you on the program. Is this is a chance to kind of touch base on what's happening automotive wise. Tell me what's noteworthy on your website, whether it's new vehicle you've reviewed or just the latest. I see a lot of people waking up to the whole thing we talked about with where your car will now be kind of a
Yeah.
rolling prison guard keeping you company on your trip.
Yep, it's been my hope to spread awareness of that, hopefully before rather than after the fact, because that's how you stop this sort of thing from happening. Another interesting tidbit, and it's today's lead story on the site, is that Honda has suffered a catastrophic loss. 2025 was the first year that it failed to make money, that it lost money. Why? Because it was in the grip of EV fever. And you think about how devastating that is because Honda is about as blue chip as it gets as far as cars go. They've never had any trouble being profitable until 2025. They have announced the cancellation of this whole line of, they call them, believe it or not, zero They were going to market these vehicles called zero. Yeah, I'll buy something that's zero, as in worthless and not worth anything. They're not going to come out. They canceled the Prologue, which is a Chevy Blazer rebranded as a Honda, which was a disastrous thing for Honda to do. Just because it's embarrassing. Like you can't make your own vehicle, so you're going to just buy one from GM and put it out there. The point is, though, that just another example of how much this whole thing has cost the industry and cost us at the end of the day. It has imposed just catastrophic consequences on the entire industry, and we're all going to be paying for it for a long time to come.
We've gotten in the habit now when my wife and I are out and about and we notice, oh, there's some new construction going on here, and the grocery store parking lot, or over here, they're building something on the edge of the canyon or whatnot. Our question now is always, oh, is it more EV stations? Is it more charging stations? Because it seems like that's the new in thing to put in. And notwithstanding, I do see a number of EVs out and about, but I'm just wondering at what point they're going to realize that all that green energy is more for show than for actual, saving the planet.
I don't think they thought it out very well because, at least in my area, there are a number of those EV kiosks, and they're always empty. I mean, occasionally there might be one EV. There'll be 8 of these places where you could line up to charge an EV. Maybe there's one lonely EV sitting there. And people can see that, and it doesn't look good. It doesn't sell people on the idea of buying an EV. So clearly, I think that they should have figured out, if they really wanted to push this, if they'd really been smart about it, and I hesitate to give voice to this, that they would have figured out a way to deny us the alternative, to do something to make it effectively impossible for us to continue to driving gas engine cars, to force us to sit there at these kiosks. And then they could have, like with the masks, created the impression that this was some sort of an organic mass movement that had occurred.
Yep. I hope that we're smart enough not to fall for it. And for those who take seriously the idea that, look, once you've been warned, you have the duty to warn people around you. That doesn't mean you have to go around, banging trash can lids together and being obnoxious. But I would hope that we don't feel like, well, I got mine and everybody else is on their own. Look for the opportunities to help people who may be teetering on that edge of, do I just go along because everybody else seems to be doing this, or do I think for myself? And be able to explain why you don't want to give up your autonomy.
Absolutely. And I think, don't be quiet about any of this stuff. I think a mistake that was made last time was people allowed social pressure to guide their actions. And like you were saying, you don't have to bang trash can lids together and be obnoxious, but say something along the lines of, I don't think, I'm not going to go along with, I don't, however you're going to phrase it, I'm not going to go along with putting on a mask. I'm not going to buy a car that is a prison, that's spyware, that's monitoring me. I'm just not interested in that. And give affirmation to others who are probably thinking the same thoughts. And after a while, everybody will start to be encouraged enough to actually say these things openly. And that's how we get something done in a positive direction.
I think one of the greatest things that any one of us can do is, by the power of example, by the happiness that you carry with you where you go, and the self-assuredness you carry as you live your life on your terms. You show other people that it can be done. You don't have to preach a sermon at them. Your actions will preach very loudly to those who are paying attention. And of course, it's also going to irritate those who, hey, you're not being sufficiently controlled. But that's their problem.
Yeah.
Let's strengthen the ones who need a little reassurance and encouragement to know, be strong. It's worth it.
Yeah. Just, when Greta says, how dare you, say, well, that's how I feel. And let her head explode.
Great as always to visit with you, Eric. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Brian. You too.